we're going to move on and talk about a recent op-ed that was written by Trent Clark. I'm going to show the there it is right there. So this is the opinion piece called "Porn Hypocrisy." And Trent told us that he writes for the Idaho State Journal, I think, on a weekly basis. And him and Dustin were kind of tussling back and forth on Facebook. So I may have to be the debate moderator here. I
I'm
really
a nice
don't know.
person.
So let me bring on Mr. Clark here. There we go.
Nice...
Hey,
Doing
Trent, how
great.
are you?
Can you hear me? Okay.
We can. Yes,
Good.
you're good to go.
Hey, Trent, how you doing?
Awesome.
I'm doing well. I've actually
Good.
tussled with Dustin, for 3-4 years now. I mean, I'm still alive,
Right.
so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. So Trent, I want you to explain your column and your point in your words, because obviously you wrote it, you thought it, you dreamed it up. I just hated on it. I want to hear how you explain it so that our audience gets the picture of what you meant, what you said, what you were thinking when you wrote it.
So what I was thinking is that when we talk about pornography, there really are two different things that we should talk about. And one is just the very occurrence of something that's objectionable. I raised 3 girls. I'm very protective of my young girls. There's stuff out there that I just wouldn't want them seeing when they're 4, 5, 6 years old, maybe 9, 10, 11 years old. I mean, there's content that I want to have a good discussion with my kids first before they see these
Sure.
images. And therefore I completely understand the reason to not have porn in a library. But there's a growing huge problem that's not the random seeing of a pornographic image. It's the $97 billion industry that has found the way to reach through digital marketing to use subliminal advertising, to use all of the tricks of the trade that I've actually had marketed to me. As you know, I was public affairs director for a Fortune 500 company. I've had Madison Avenue firms come in and say, hey, look what we can do. And they can, through digital marketing, use all kinds of psychostimulative techniques to get you to click on women's fashions, and then from women's fashions you go click on women's negligees, and then it'll just take you down this hole until you get to a porn site. And the goal of all of that marketing is to get you into a paywall. That's what it's about.
Sure.
That is not the same thing as the random picture I might see in a book at a library. It's just a completely different arena, and it is the much bigger threat to our kids. And I say that that was really the point of my column, was that the digital world that can basically reach out and grab our kids is the bigger threat. And you just really didn't see that in the balance of how much time and effort and energy went into combating porn in the most recent legislature. A huge amount went into that libraries bill. Very little went into dealing with the flow of porn through digital devices and cell phones into the eyes of our kids. And that's why I say that was kind of hypocritical, because you really should deal with the bigger threat and put more time and effort into the bigger threat.
So Trent and I disagree about solutions here, but I want to make one thing clear. He's coming from a great place, which is kids should not be exposed to this bull crap when they're young. Like, I have an 11-year-old son. We're having those talks. His mom talks to him regularly. She's home more than I am. Kids their minds are warped by this stuff. We absolutely need to protect them. But the bill that he's talking about was a big government bill that would have absolutely inserted government in a place that it should not be. Trent, do you remember exactly like all the tenets of the bill? I just remember, I don't remember exactly how it was written. Can you tell us a little bit more about the actual piece of legislation?
Well, so first of all, I need to let you know that this is this was the iteration of a bill that came up last year. Last year, I know that the Freedom Foundation did a really sharp critique of the bill, and everything you said, by the way, was much more true of that original bill. But and here's where sometimes I think that the Freedom Foundation doesn't take credit for what good it does, because believe it or not, as you draft a piece of legislation, people are now looking at the criteria and saying,
Yep.
okay, well, we don't want this scored down here. We don't want it scored down here. And so they'll redraft the bill to try to make it less big government. And that is in fact what happened. The bill used to require the installation of porn filters on cell phones. After a lot of thought and discussion, it was kind of decided, no, we don't need to do that, because every cell phone that is activated in the United States right now actually is activated with a porn filter on it. So there's no requirement to download a piece of software onto a cell phone, because they all have one on them. And so the thinking was, well, why don't we take advantage of the one that's there? And then the real question was, how do you make it so that an adult doesn't have to deal with the filter, but a kid does? And so the most recent version, in fact, even this last year, there were two different versions. The first version didn't take advantage of this. The second version did, and that is, it focused on the fact that there's been constitutional rulings that you cannot block an underage minor from buying a cell phone. Cell phones are emergency communication devices. They are, it's been ruled that a kid, 12-year-old kid, 13-year-old kid, has a right to buy a cell phone. What they don't have a right to do is sign a contract. And as you know, to get cellular service, you have to sign a contract. And so the bill was rewritten so that it actually kicks in only when an adult signs that contract for cellular service. And if you've ever activated a phone, it pops up with a bunch of questions. And you just answer. There will now be in Idaho, according to the bill, a question that says, would you like to set a PIN on this phone? If you answer that yes, then that cellular service that goes to that phone will have a porn filter switched on that can be turned off with a PIN, and the PIN is owned by the adult who signed the contract. Okay, and the parent can just hand that phone to the kid if they want, and that porn filter is on. The parent can also say, no, I don't want to set up a PIN because this phone's going to be for me, in which case nothing happens. And
Okay.
So that's how it works. It's just it will be a question that says, would you like to set up a PIN?
Greg, any thoughts on that before I go at this?
Yeah. So before Dustin and you start going back and forth here, I'll get my 2 cents in, and then I'll ring the bell and we can go. No, I'm just kidding. So I mean, I think to, I guess, reiterate what Dustin said, I think everybody here in this chat and on this podcast agree that kids should not be looking at porn, right? And that the sex talk should probably primarily be taking place between the parents and their own children. I think where I guess so during this whole debate, honestly, I didn't follow this bill nearly as much, and this whole debate nearly as much as I was following the HB 71 to ban kids from mutilating themselves and drugging themselves in the name of gender ideology. I was much more concerned about that. But I mean, I understand that there is a disparity, and I think, and I know a lot of it comes from, the libraries and the schools are ran by the government, and that's taxpayer funded, and that's where you're going to see obviously a very big wing of the Republican Party who was concerned about that, but it wasn't that they want kids to look at porn. They were just like, hey, wait a minute, the cell phones aren't ran by the government unless you've got an Obama phone from 2010 or whenever that was, right? And then maybe there's an argument to be had there. My big concern, at least from the ISAA's perspective, came from we were going to allow people to sue the manufacturers, so they're going to sue T-Mobile and Verizon And I'm like, well, we're kind of setting up this basis for, well, why don't we sue the gun manufacturers, which has turned into a really big problem in a lot of states where they're suing the gun manufacturers where a mass shooting has taken place. And so that was one of my primary concerns with that. But my other one was, we're barking up the wrong tree here. Like, my kid is 15 years old. He doesn't have a smartphone. He has a Gab phone. A Gab phone is $25. The Gab phone can call, it can text, and that's pretty much it. It can take pictures, but he can't text pictures. I mean, it's literally locked down as much as you can really want it locked down. To me, we've got to get back to God, and we've got to get back to good parenting. And there's so many things out there that the parents should be doing without needing the government's involvement. But my big primary concern during the session with this particular debate was not letting this idea of it's okay to sue the manufacturers of products who aren't, I mean, Verizon's not out producing porn as far as I know. I guess if they are, you would have an argument. So that's my 2 cents on this whole debate. But my big one was the HB 71 session.
And by the way, on HB 71, I actually didn't get involved in that piece of legislation. I did check out the section dealing with Klinefelter syndrome, and actually found it was very well written. Representative Skog did a great job on that portion of the bill. It was represented out on Facebook that somehow I was lobbying against that bill, and I wasn't. Like I said, the only section that I really studied I liked, so I had no problem with that bill.
Sure.
Dustin and I will talk about this, but I do disagree with your characterization. House Bill 314, which was the so-called libraries bill, I just checked it. It actually applies to both public and private schools, and it doesn't even have a definition of public libraries. And I thought, well, that is problematic because, for instance, there's this, which is oh, you can't see it.
Yeah, that's not coming through.
Yeah, it's called the Boise Book Bike is a library available to it's actually looks like a fun activity. People ride around with a tent that has books available in the tent, and it's like a mobile library, and it would have been covered by this, although I don't see anywhere where it's funded by anything but private donations. So neither the schools are limited to public schools, nor the libraries are limited to government funded libraries in that bill. So I'm just letting factually, 314 covered institutions that receive no government funds. Okay. Now, I just did a little checking. Did you know that you cannot broadcast cellular signal in the United States of America without a license to do so from the Federal Communications Commission?
Yeah, that seems pretty basic. Yeah,
they own that signal.
Yeah,
and especially given and so, Greg, a lot of your concerns would have applied to the first version of Senator Cook's bill this year, but not to the second version, because among other things, the private right of action that would allow you to sue Verizon, that was removed. The second version, IACI, which represents Verizon and T-Mobile and all those companies, IACI withdrew their opposition to the second version. So the manufacturers of the phones were not on record opposing it. Basically, it was the Freedom Foundation, and then the National Digital Marketing Organization that, let's be honest, they represent the folks that make money selling porn. So that's who was left opposing the bill. And I understand that the Freedom Foundation was opposing it on philosophical grounds, but I really had hoped that they would take a look at how Senator Cook really tried to address the concern with freedom. And the imposition at the very end was very minor. It wasn't dealing with private things at all. It was dealing with a public communication channel. And the question,
But this is not a public communication channel. It's just not. And here we go. I'm sorry. I just can't. It's not yes, the airwaves and the signals, all that licensed by the government so that they can control everything that they want to control. Let's be clear about that. They want control over these things so that they can pull the strings. We saw that during COVID. The more they control, the more they can shut down. But do you know what my family does? Greg's family has one solution. They get Gab phones. My kids have their own tablets. I wish they didn't, but their schooling and stuff happens. We pay $12 a month for Ever Accountable. There's an app called Canopy that you can get. There are myriad apps out there. Why do we need an anti-freedom piece of legislation when it's so easy for parents to say $12 and I can cover 400 devices in my family? Like, why do we need government to step in here, Trent?
because, as I already explained, any 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old kid who breaks their phone, who loses their phone, can walk in. Very often, those phones are on an insurance plan or a replacement plan. They can walk into a cell phone store and they can get a new phone, and they don't even have to have parental permission to do so. And the beauty of Senator Cook's bill is that's fine. They can get a phone without their parents' knowledge, but they can't hook up to a cellular plan without their parents setting the parameters that says there will be a porn filter on your ability to go out and reach onto the internet and grab pornography. And that is the parent basically exercising control over access to the internet. I don't see how that is not an imposition on anybody's freedom. That's a parent having the ability to control whether this kid can reach out and grab pornography off the internet.
But that's the thing is the way that it's written is actually very clever. It's written so that it can pass Idaho Freedom Foundation muster, which good job, Wayne. Good job, Brian. Good job, Brandon. Great job, guys. But it's still there, right? It's still an imposition telling government or telling these private companies, you have to do this. There are a couple of concerns with the piece of legislation that IFF did voice, and Brian just dropped them in the comments. Thank you, Brian, for being our personal assistant here. The one of the big issues was it was browsers only. Browsers only. Who uses a browser anymore on their phone? I'm dead serious. You can get porn through apps, and it's not necessarily the same porn that we're all thinking of, but there are some very scandalous photos on Instagram. You can find scandalous photos on Facebook. You can go on Discord. Oh my goodness, you can find stuff on Discord. That's so the question is like, how far do we take this? There are people who think that bikinis, two-piece bikinis, that's porn. Like, are we okay censoring that stuff now? Like, so can we censor certain scenes on Netflix? Do we need to regulate Hulu? Do we need to regulate Netflix and all those, Amazon Prime, everything? Like, how far do we take this, Trent?
Well, so those are all good questions, and that's a rabbit hole that this bill didn't go down, and that was one of the decisions. Let's just use the porn filter that the market is already demanding beyond there. And so the decision to go and let me address some of Brian's comments. First of all, you have to understand this is an attempt to get at and disrupt that psychostimulative advertising that reaches out and grabs the kids and pulls them in. The random sexting issue is wrong. It's bad. I don't want my kids seeing that. But that's wrong and bad. It's not a $97 billion industry reaching out trying to get some kid past a paywall. Okay, there's a difference. And so this view of, well, if it doesn't get rid of every pornographic image, then we shouldn't do it at all. No, the filter does one thing, and the one thing it does well is it disrupts that point and click, the clickbait process that reaches out continually and tries to get more stimulative content onto the phone. And that's what we're after. That we just want that functionality.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I guess I just sit here and look. I think Trent's coming from a good
Yeah.
place. I think he doesn't want kids to look at porn. I don't want kids to look at porn. So I hope we can at least at the end of this all agree that nobody wants their kids looking
Facts.
at porn. I think of this in gun terms, right? And how, you know,
Is that just that's programmed? That's how you think? Like,
that's programmed into me. That's what I've been doing for 10 years. But like seriously, in some regard, it's like, well, we're going to ban this one thing, or we're going to do this one little solution, and we all know it's not going to do anything, right? There's too many guns here. I went to Iraq for a year. Trust me, you ain't getting rid of the guns in America if we couldn't do it in Iraq. And I think with this, technology is advancing so fast. And let's be honest, the people behind porn and pushing all this stuff are evil, right? They're led by evilness. And so you're going to pass this one little law that you think is going to do something, and they're going to get around it like that. And so to me, the focus really should be, again, it's on taking care of your kids. Like we've got to get kids, we got to get back to praying, we got to get back to God, we got to get back to controlling what you've got in your house. And that's kind of the best that you can do, is helping them understand those psychostimulants and here's why these things are bad, and just educating your kids a lot more. And anyway, so that's I guess that's where I'm coming from.
By the way, I don't disagree. And if any parent thinks that Senator Cook's bill is a panacea that makes it so you don't have to care about what your kids are watching on the phone, that you completely got that wrong. The whole purpose of the bill is to put the power back in the hands of a parent so that the parent can do their job. That means parents have to be doing their job. So
but that's Trent. I love you, buddy. I love you for coming on, but that's just not the case. The if you can't control your kid's phone, you need to hang it up as a parent anyway. Like, you need to just hang it up, because like my kids aren't like, again, I'm like Greg. My kids are either going to have Gab phones or they're going to have the light phone, which I actually wish that I had, which is just phone and text. That's it. But I also want to raise one other point. I follow a guy named Jonathan Haidt, who wrote Coddling of the American Mind. He runs Heterodox Academy now, and he's big on teen mental health. And Utah's taking this path, which is they've discovered, numerous studies have said social media itself is bad for kids, right? Facebook, Instagram. I can't imagine the bullying that goes on in some of these like Whisper, some of these apps. Like, that's really bad for kids. My kids are not going to have social media for years. They're going to hate me for it, and they will thank me in their 20s and 30s. But the question is again, are we going to start using activist government to regulate every social ill? I am fat, dude. Like, are we going to go the New York thing and ban big sodas? Like, that's not what government is here for. It's just not. It's not here to parent my kids, right? Just tell me about that.
No, I actually think you raised a really good point. I had a discussion with Wayne, by the way, on this very issue, and he raised on-screen time as if you're worried about porn and you're worried about the psychostimulative effect of the porn advertisers, why are not you worried about all the other psychostimulative effects of everybody else trying to advertise on cell phones? And the fact that, understand there are industries that make money on clicks. They're trying to get your kids to click more and more and more, spending more and more on screen time. Here's the beauty of it. Do you know what more and more is now being offered every single time you sign up for a cellular plan, in almost exactly the way that Senator Cook's bill would have the PIN option offered?
I have no idea.
On-screen time controls. On-screen time controls are now being offered with the cellular plan right up front, so that the parent can say,
wait, is that government regulated, Trent?
It isn't. That, by the way.
Wait a second. Hang on for a second. So they're doing something that's good without the government intervening at all in any way, shape, or form.
That is right. And now, do you want me to tell you the little secret as to why they don't do that with porn? Because as an industry,
it's money.
They're almost already down the rabbit hole where the cigarette manufacturers were, and they can't come out and admit that they've been doing damage. That's why they won't do it with porn, but they'll do it with on-screen time. Because the data is now out there showing. I mean, there's now very solid clinical data showing that entire lives of people have been ruined by underage addiction to pornography. And and the industry that's out there is saying, oh, we could be on the same hook that the tobacco companies were, so let's just deny that that's a thing.
Yeah.
And so they have resisted putting porn filters on as a default, but they're willing to do on-screen time controls as a default. The market is telling them to do that, but they don't want to accept the liability. And that's the reason I think Senator Cook's bill is needed, just to get us past what is really a government, you have to admit, this whole liability morass is created by government.
Yeah.
And so therefore we're trying to get past an obstacle the market would solve, except government has created a problem here.
Yeah. All right, Trent, we got to move on. Seriously, props to you. You and I disagree on literally everything, I think.
We do.
But I have to give you props for coming on and having a civil discussion with us. Nobody expected that from me. So, I mean, we did it. We did something good tonight. Thank you so much for coming on. I disagree with you, but I'm sure we'll have you on again when we disagree on something stupid in the future.
Sure enough. Thank you very much.